Welcome. I'm Steve Winick with the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress, and I'm here with Ann Yao and her husband Li Wei, and we'll be talking about Ann's career as a musician. She plays traditional Chinese music, and we've had her in our Homegrown concert series twice now, most recently in the 2020 Homegrown at Home concert series. So Ann and Li, welcome to the Library of Congress in our virtual way of doing this interview. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you. We are very pleasure to be invited.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Well, yeah, you're very welcome. So let's start with a sort of early easy question. And where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Shanghai, China, and grew up in Shanghai too.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents.
And you had music in your household when you were growing up, is that right?
Yes.
So describe the musical household.
Yes, my grandfather was a famous pipa and a vertical bamboo flute player, and he was a leader in the Shanghai. She was a leader in Shanghai traditional ensemble music troupe, not a troupe, called a kind of like a big orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And my aunt is a teacher in Shanghai Conservatory. She teaches gujjang. That's what I learned from. Mm-hmm. But in early age, I started to play the pipa, learned from my grandfather. Then about a couple of years later, I feel gujjang is more interesting, sounds more pretty, and the techniques seems easier for the beginner. So I switched to the gujjang with my aunt.
Mm-hmm.
Also, my uncle was a teacher in both the gujjang professor in Shanghai Conservatory.
So when you were growing up, there was a particular kind of ensemble that your grandfather played in and directed. Is that right? Could you describe that for us a little bit?
Yes, he established some friends or musician friends, and since our home has a space, so it's kind of the place for all get together to play the Jiangnan Sizu is typical Shanghai region area Chinese ensemble music.
Mm-hmm.
That's during 1930s, and he also had a trip in U.S. during World War II time for get like money from so kind of a tour trip.
Some raising money to some of the soldiers,
mm-hmm.
In the US and China, I think, right? Yeah. So is that the name called the Show Yao Ensemble?
Show Yao Yuetan. Yes. Yeah. That's the original the group name.
The ensemble.
Yeah.
So you were growing up within that musical tradition, that particular kind of ensemble.
Yes.
And you mentioned the pipa, which you played before the zheng. So explain that instrument a little bit, just because it's another one for people to know about.
Okay, the pipa is the 4-string vertical lute, like a pear shape. So they also call but the songs, the techniques to play is one left and right 2-finger. So it kind of sounded like a pipa. So that's the kind of image, imitation the sound. So they call the pipa, I think. What I get is, and the right hand 5 fingers play, and the left hand has flexure like a guitar. So the left hand is for play, hold the instrument.
Sure.
Yeah.
But then, as I guess a child or a teenager, you switch to playing the gujjang, which is what you mostly play today.
Yes.
And you ended up you were playing with the Youth Palace Orchestra in Shanghai as a teenager. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
So
Yeah.
what is that? Describe that for us, if you would.
It's actually I play solo most time. I really didn't join the ensemble or orchestra. Since my instrument is kind of a typical solo instrument, so most time is for performing for the foreigners.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of during that period of time, a lot of China just opened the door for the foreigners. A lot of tourists or all kind of group visited Shanghai, so they will invite those youth kind of exchange cultural programs. So we perform for that.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, there is some kind of a transition period between Ann's grandfather's time, that the majority of music activities at that time in southern China is primarily like ensemble based, not solo. But when it's this like the late 70s, early 80s, now because there's some reform of music instruments and try to increase volume and make the skills more complicated. And I think there's also tendency to imitate some of the Western musical skills. And also virtuosity is the new thing that time. So that's why Ann said, your instrument become kind of a solo instrument at that time.
Yeah. So people were, when you say musical instrument reform, people were adapting the instruments in order to sound louder, but also adapt to Western scales and other forms of playing. Is that what you were mentioning? Yeah.
And also, very important distinction. Back in Ann's grandfather's generation, the ensemble is really just small ensemble. It's like an indoor ensemble, right? Mm-hmm. Even though they can also play outdoors too. It's the notion is small, but it's very much improvisation. But eventually they developed a larger ensemble, but also moved to concert hall indoor. And that's why it's very similar to like a symphony orchestra, like in the West. So there's big development.
Very interesting. So one thing that this opens up a little bit is there's a tendency here in the U.S. when we see music from other cultures, including China, but also India and Nepal, all kinds of cultures in Asia, to think of it all as some kind of folk music, even though it's a classical tradition at home. So I guess a question I have is, what degree of the music you were playing, what amount of it was folk music versus what would be considered classical music or court music or other kinds of art music in China?
Okay, I can. I think this is a very good question, actually. When we talk about classical music, actually, as we learn from most conservatory or university system, Western classical music called classical, the other like country music or some other different genres, right?
Yeah.
But since the advent of the serious study of non-Western traditional music eventually becomes scientific study of non-Western music, we call this ethnomusicology, right? So they recognize they actually have a classical music, and most notably India and China, and sometimes also Japan too, because they do have advanced music theories, tunings and music repertoires. So I think in that case, people regarding Chinese, not all of them, okay, but when China's first conservatory established in 1927 in Shanghai, is actually our conservatory. They introduced not only the Western music, also the traditional music. They both are taught in conservatory. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, you think like comparable to the classical music, but they still have their own distinctive tradition.
Right. So, and then you did attend the conservatory in Shanghai, and what was that like, the training that you had there?
From home, originally, I learned most is Chinese music, classical or traditional or some local different type of school region music for guzheng. After in the conservatory, we learned the music theory, actually Western notation, also Western music history, but the time we went to the conservatory is after Cultural Revolution. So a lot of class or some course is just established. Some still kind of try to develop a new course or so a lot of Western, no, actually not a lot, just starting have some Western group musician performance, start to come into China. So we kind of get and learn about some modern music, like contemporary music too. And my uncle, he invented a guzheng, kind of tried, since the Western instrument, Western culture influenced to China. So guzheng originally is a pentatonic scale. So several Chinese instruments tried to change to invent to what, like a 12-tone instrument, like a dulcimer.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the professor in Shanghai Conservatory kind of invented the dulcimer as a 12-tone. So my uncle, he invented the guzheng as like a 12-tone guzheng. This is the one I'm the first one to learn this instrument, or the butterfly guzheng, because the shape looks like a butterfly. So that's so I'm kind of very interesting to challenge myself to learn different things. So that's also because of relative. I'm kind of lucky to get a new thing to start to learn. Yeah.
And you had two different distinct lineages that you studied, right? When you studied to play the instrument, you had two professors who had different regional styles. So talk about the regions and the different styles of gujjang, if you could.
Yeah, I started with my aunt. She is learned from her teacher was Zhejiang, special typical Shanghai region, Jiangsu and Zhejiang area. So near Shanghai, those the typical school. And my uncle was from northern China. He studied in Tianjin and Beijing. So and also he learned a different school like Henan, Shandong. Those all the province. Those schools, local theatrical music related to the language, and also the Hakka in southern China. Mm-hmm. Because my uncle has learned different, more schools than my aunt. So I'm kind of lucky to get a chance to learn all the different schools from my uncle. After to the conservatory, most time I learned from uncle.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So when you graduated from the conservatory, you ended up going to Beijing for a national ensemble. Was that was that a little scary to go to the big central?
Yes. Shanghai people just like a New Yorker, it's kind of a typical metropolitan area, grow up and a living style. So Beijing is a kind of attractive city too, but for living status, not as convenience and luxury as Shanghai. So the first time I went to Beijing, actually I delayed the time, so they keep calling to ask me to go there. But finally, I have to get a job. So that's why I went there. And but it's kind of since young, so still have some new thing to learn and to see. And Beijing, that time I went there, I feel very interesting place to stay, to live in, and also culture is different in Shanghai.
And that is also a very interesting period of time, which is kind of about to marry, because I worked in the Shanghai Conservatory at that time. I, after graduate, and then she, that time, during that time, you don't get to pick the job, and the job pick you. So it's kind of assignment, basically, assign your job to Beijing. That time, I think what Anne tried to say is material life-wise, Shanghai is more rich. Beijing is still behind Shanghai. But Beijing, of course, is a cultural center. It also political center, right? So lot of dynamic life there. And but for her music, I think Shanghai Conservatory have a pretty good training, and that's why they want her to join the National Ensemble. Yeah.
So how was it playing with the National Ensemble?
Unfortunately, I didn't stay in there too long, only 2 years. But luckily, I as soon as I been picked in the ensemble, they already put me in the member for Olympic Arts Festival troupe. So that's why I went there, and we had like a special troupe with, they're separated with the big troupe ensemble group. So we had a special training, had special trade in a special place. So we went to training for the Olympic Arts Festival.
If I may, because 1984, China first, joined the Olympic Games, and that is in Los Angeles, and China sends large delegations, including the music performing group. Yeah, so luckily, Anne is also the that is ensemble and performed in the for the Olympic Games. Yeah, as part of their cultural festival.
Yeah, we remember those games and the celebration of China joining on this side as well, of course. And it was just it was an amazing thing. So did you play mostly within the Olympic Village during that?
Yeah. That's only like a week or two. Then after the Olympic Games performance, we had a tour trip, tour performance in US. So kind of a fun life that time. Yeah, still kind of a very, very interesting to memorize that.
Right. And not that long after you moved to the US. So how did that come about? How did your move occur?
Yeah, because his Lee's study, he got accepted a foreign student in Kent State University. So I joined him about 10 months after he came here.
Right.
So
yeah, and I think also we are very lucky because that time, even though we just got newly wed, and the system in China is like because we have a kind of they call the hukou is residential system. It's very rigid. So you're in Shanghai, my wife Ann in Beijing. We cannot move freely unless you have a job in Beijing or she has a job in Shanghai, so we can move together. And so finally I said, well, maybe we can find a solution. We'll together move to US. That's how we got a job. So I applied for the grad program in US, first in Kent State in Ohio, then 2 years later, and I transferred to Columbia in New York. So of course, in New York is much lively and dynamic.
Yes, I went to Columbia myself. That's my so we have that in common. So then, Anne, you were in the the Sounds of China ensemble in New York, or the Music of China ensemble.
Yes.
Yeah. How was that playing?
That time I was very how should I say, for the career, for the musical and for my instrument career, I feel music from China gave me a lot of opportunity to learn new things. A lot of modern Chinese composer that time they are all in New York, so we did a lot of experimental music together, like a Tandun, Zhou Long, Chen Yi, those right now is a very famous composer, contemporary composer. So the time I'm kind of lucky. The time I was in New York, and then they all had some new music, led us to try, and also music from China is the pioneer for Chinese contemporary music group. So we get a lot of chance to perform and with Western instrument, or all the modern composers' music.
Right.
So, it's a very interesting experience there, that time.
Thank you. And I should clarify that the ensemble is called Music from China.
Yes.
The reason I made the mistake that I made actually is because we were talking about Columbia, and we used to have a radio show on Columbia University Radio called Sounds of China, which you probably heard when you were in New York. It was the Chinese Students Association ran this radio show very, very efficiently, and I think it's still going on today. So that's the reason I said Sounds of China instead of Music from China. I got confused for a moment. I apologize.
No problem.
But to move back to Ann's career, after a while of playing with music from China, you ended up moving to Florida, which is a whole other climate from New York, and of course a lot of opportunities there for traditional musicians. So explain your move.
Right. Well, that time, and also China has kind of a Tiananmen Square issue.
Right.
And also Lee is about like a halfway to the school, ending the school. So I got a friend, actually is a schoolmate, had contacted me, see if I'm interested to get a job. It's performing in a restaurant. The restaurant is it's kind of a brand new restaurant. They just opened in Orlando area, and I said, well, that's kind of a good opportunity to make money. That time we're still foreign students, and partner not able to work that time. So fortunately, and after this 89 event in China, so got U.S. government allowed all the Chinese students or visitors here able to can start to work. So I talked to some friends, asked their opinion. So they suggested, well, that's not bad. You can start earn money. You can start this. It's a good opportunity, and also you still play your instrument.
Right.
So I will move down first. Lee still continue studying in Columbia, and several years, and also have a Disney. Epcot Center has Chinese, the China Pavilion. They also need a music ensemble or music performance there. So I kind of a lucky friends introduce or give us opportunity to Epcot. That time was very, very good for cultural expression. So they hire a lot of different music or performance in Walt Disney World. So luckily I got the job there. So that's performing in that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's true. We interview musicians from a lot of different traditions, and a lot of them have gone through Epcot Center as
Yeah.
part of their professional development, just because it was such a center for traditional music from different cultures. So,
Right.
what was it like to play in the China Pavilion there?
Well, first it's kind of exciting, and you're able to see all different cultural performance too. And before we have starting, we have three musicians together, and later one musician starting to own business, so he quit the performance for only have two musicians, one of dulcimer, hammer dulcimer, and my instrument. So we kind of two musicians together, play almost 6-7 years. Then 911 start. After 911, all this entertainment getting kind of start a layoff. So one of my partner been laid off, unfortunately. So I starting solo since that time. I think it's 2001.
Mm-hmm.
2002, until they recently, not actually 10 years already, 2000 until 2010, they started close all the show until right now, almost 80% or 90% of entertainment is on.
We're sorry to hear that. Yeah, like I said, it was a great thing for traditional music of many cultures, but it was nice to know you were there playing traditional Chinese music all
Right,
the time.
right.
Yeah. So one thing that I'd like to mention too is you've worked with the Florida Arts Council as a master in their Folklife Apprentice program. That's something that we love here at the library too, because it spreads that traditions in that way. So if you could explain how you got involved in that and explain your apprenticeship, that would be wonderful.
Yes. I was teaching when I was in New York too. So, but of course, Florida, it's different environment. The cultural environment is different as New York City. In New York City, there's more Chinese people and more opportunity to have better students. But here, it's kind of hard. Unfortunately, I got several students, they're interested. And first student I got is 5 or 6 years old. He's living in Melbourne. It's about an hour and a half driving from there to Orlando, my home.
Yeah.
And her mother is Chinese and her father is American. So the girl is interested to learn play the gujjang because her aunt has a gujjang at home, so she just play that and like the song. So they searched, finally found me. So I start teaching her, and she's pretty good. She got like 2 times apprenticeship. Yeah, and later on, after she went to college, then stopped to learn. And the other one, recently I got the one about 2 years ago, is from a local, and she is a high school student. The end of almost finished the high school, but she kind of interested from a movie, heard a song, so she likes to learn that, and she's very smart, very quick to pick, quickly to pick it up. So, and that's why a couple months later, and got we think maybe she can apply for the apprenticeship. So that's the way that's the reason we have one. Unfortunately, right now, COVID, she cannot continue studying, and she went to college and got more busy for her own school works.
Yeah, I hope when the pandemic calms down, you'll be able to have students again, because it's so important to spread the tradition to the next generation and let students learn.
Right.
So one thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is the gujjang itself, the tradition behind your instrument and how it's changed over the years. So explain just how, you know, the historical development of the instrument as you understand it.
Yeah, the instrument originally is small. The size is small, only like five strings, like silk strings originally in China. Most instruments, the string instrument use silk.
Mm-hmm.
And later, the times change, the instrument, you know, getting expanded bigger and bigger. During 1950s, especially in Shanghai, the factory, the instrument factory, they kind of developed the 21 string, the guzheng string instrument. Then also the string changed to nylon and metal, so make it sounds louder.
Yeah.
Then can play on stage. So the 21 is kind of a more standardized right now. And also it's a pentatonic scale. So there's 4 octaves. And normally we use the right hand, pluck the 3 or 4 fingers on right hand to pluck the strings. And for traditional music on guzheng, left hand only press the string on there's a bridge, hold the string, divide to 2 sides. The right side to pluck the string, to pluck the melody for tuning the tunes. And left side is for the left hand press the string to create the vibrato or bending notes.
Mm-hmm.
And until after 1960s, a lot of the Western cultural influence to China. So composers or guzheng musicians, they arrange some song or compose the songs with the Western techniques like harp or piano. So the left hand start to play, join with the right hand.
Mm-hmm. And also explain the butterfly guzheng, the one that you pioneered.
Sure, yeah. The butterfly guzheng is actually like a combined 2 guzheng together. So originally the guzheng stand on the one side, the right side, on the guzheng on the edge. Butterfly, because combine 2 guzheng together. So I was sitting in the center, the middle of the instrument, to play, both sides, kind of like the 2 instruments have a wall, but the string is across those wall together. So there's like a 12 tone, actually divided by half.
Mm-hmm.
So 12 like a 6, 6 one side, 6 notes that side. So it's
interesting.
Yeah. So I think basically the so-called butterfly can fundamentally change the way you play because it's chromatically tuned. So it's tried to accommodate some new composition, modern composition. You can freely transpose mode, different tunes. Because traditional zheng can only play, one kind of one key. Then if you want to play different, you have to move back and all these bridges, But that one just free you up, play it freely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you'd have to learn everything new because the plucking is completely different strings, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. So but it does free you also to play a wider range of music.
Right.
And
still the 4 octaves, but you have a chromatic scale,
right?
So you can play because it doesn't have a composer to compose the music yet. So we just use the West like a Baha, and also the cello piece for the what's the part is
it's the
the goose,
swan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Swan.
It's swan. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But there have been some compositions by modern composers, Chinese composers, that you've performed on concertos and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that concerto is still traditional music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think there is one recording Ann made is still based on traditional
I see.
zheng, but with also traditional tuning. But with some modern composers, I think one of the Cantonese music and also maybe zhou longs,
yeah,
right?
but not on
the traditional zheng, but you have to tune differently.
Yeah,
so
change the tune.
Sounds very avant-garde.
Yeah.
I see.
That's what I kind of challenge myself in during the time I live in New York. So that time we with music from China and a lot of new composer, they just try to see how the instrument can do, how widely the musician can play. So that's why I have to kind of establish some different scales, different keys. That's kind of an interesting thing to do that.
Absolutely. So another project that I want to give you the opportunity to mention is you worked with our colleagues at the Smithsonian and played on a piece that had ancient Chinese bells as part of the.
Oh yeah, that's a Zhou Long's composed the music. I believe at that time is Yu Ma and Wu Man, they kind of have idea for the Silk Road project.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a kind of give a opportunity to show this music. It's a kind of a starting Silk Road project, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the performance. Have a half Chinese ensemble, half Western group instrument ensemble. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to play, but the musical style still is not a very modern. It's kind of still traditional way to play. But we had a chance to play the really ancient gong. I think it's the gong.
The bell.
It's a bell. Oh yeah. It's a library. I mean, the Smithsonian Library, they allowed us to play that, and of course, not to touch it. And the people have to wear gloves.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing what the Smithsonian has in their museum, and it's like us at the Library of Congress. We have such wonderful treasures, including now 2 concerts by Ann. So I guess we're about to wrap up, but I'd like to ask. I know that the pandemic has caused a lot of musicians to have to rethink and retool. How are you guys doing in the current situation?
I just try to see if any opportunity ask me to do this kind of virtual performance. That's what I do. I done. And after Library Congress and Richmond Folk Festival, I also done with Wu Man, the Pipa player, for Autumn Moon Festival with Corona string quartet.
Oh, the Kronos, quartet, yeah.
It's California. Right?
It's in California, yeah.
California.
So that's.
I think it's a virtual concerts. It's the norm. It's the new normal.
Yeah, it's weird, and yet it's liberating in certain ways because you can play anywhere, but it's imperfect, of course, in other ways. So. We're so happy to have had you in the series again, and we're so thankful to you and to Lee for doing this interview as well. So we just want to say thank you one more time. And I see you've got another photo.
And I just if I may, this is Ann's aunt.
Oh right, okay.
So he is like 80.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, 80. Yeah.
So another photo I want to show you is 2012. I regularly took students to China for field study. This is where we stop in Shanghai. You can still see this is very, very simple kind of room, small room, but this is still alive, so-called silk bamboo tradition, silk bamboo music tradition. Sit on the back is Ann's aunt. This old tradition is still alive in Shanghai, and we're glad her family is still family members, still doing this.
And this is my grandfather when they toured in U.S. during 1930s.
Oh, great!
Yeah, that's
great.
Yeah.
So I guess that's another question that we didn't address. So if we could, have you been able to go back to China and play music there since moving to the U.S. very much, or is it harder to move on?
I didn't have any chance to do that. And
yeah, I think for the first 20 years, she even didn't get a chance to get it like because of the visa issue, right?
Yeah, right.
16 years. Yeah,
16 years.
I haven't have any chance to do that. And
yeah, I think for the first 20 years, she even didn't get a chance to get it like because of the visa issue, right?
Yeah, right.
16 years. Yeah,
16 years.
I haven't been back with my family or relatives until 16 years after I left China.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's hard, a hard separation, but we're glad that you came here because we're so thankful to have your music here. So I guess I just want to say thank you one more time from the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress to Ann Yao and her husband Li Wei. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's our honor.